With that, friends, I'm going to move from Hayom Yom on to today's topic, which is the stories of the kings of Israel. We're moving on with the conclusion of the life of Elijah. Okay, we're moving on to the life of Elijah, the end of Elijah's appearance on this earth. And just to tell you, I gave a sermon on Shabbos this week. We had a bar mitzvah, an intimate bar mitzvah event for Harry Saperstein. It was a very beautiful event. And the way we understood the mitzvah of prayer was based upon a story from the prophets. That was my sermon this week. Without being familiar with the stories of the prophets, you're missing a real chunk of Judaism. So even though these are just stories, they shed light, tremendous insight, and profound wisdom upon much of our Torah pursuits. So let's not minimize the importance of studying the stories of the prophets. With that, I'm moving forward. All the days of Elijah the prophet, he was busy with bringing his brothers, the people of Israel, back into Shuvah to help them in everything that they needed spiritually. Only one time, when Queen Isabel was running after him so much that she was trying to kill him, his spirit broke and he spoke badly about the people of Israel. So only one time did he actually break his spirit. If somebody's like in a welding shop or something, if you can mute yourself with that dinging sound. Okay.
Elaine, it's you. You got to put yourself on mute.
No, it's the clocks.
All right. So turn the clocks up. Okay. So when Elijah the prophet was in Har Chorev, Har Chorev is another name for Mount Sinai. Hashem asked him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I ran away from the children of Israel who are trying to kill me." He was talking about the Queen Isabel and King Achav. And I'm angry I'm angry with your people Israel that they abandoned your Torah, they destroyed your altars, and they killed your prophets. These words of Elijah were not favorable in the eyes of Hashem. Even though the Jews did indeed sin, they were still the sons of God, and Hashem did not want to hear bad words about his sons. "Why do you speak badly about my sons?" asked Hashem. "Why are you so angry with them? Did they leave your Torah? Did they destroy your altars?" Hashem asked Elijah. They ruined my covenant, and they were my prophets that they were killed, and I forgive them with my great love for them. But now, if you cannot tolerate them anymore, then you have to return to your place, and you have to anoint your successor, Elisha, the son of Shaphat, from a place called Avel. We learned about him last week. Remember, he was the guy that witnessed the chariots of fire, which carried Elijah up to heaven in that beautiful story. So this guy, Elisha ben Shaphat, comes from a place called Avel Mechola. He should be anointed by you as your successor, the next prophet of Israel. And if you think that the children of Israel are evil, then go to Damascus, and you should check out what the other guys are doing, what the Goyim are doing over there. They have 365 different kinds of idols, and they serve all of them every day. Nevertheless, I don't prosecute them, and I still provide for them sunlight every day, every night. I give them moonlight. Besides, no, you should learn from my ways, from my tolerant ways, says Hashem to Elijah. And you should behave like I behave, to always be an advocate on behalf of Israel, to always give them the benefit of the doubt. By the way, as a result of this story, this is the reason why we have a seat of Elijah at every bris. Do you remember, guys, about we always have a seat of Elijah at the bris? Have you ever wondered what on earth Elijah has got to do with the bris? Have you ever thought about that? Why do we have Elijah at a bris? Like, what's the reason? So the reason is because of this particular story. Because Elijah spoke badly about the Jews having broken the covenant with God, therefore Hashem said, "I will make you personally testify, bear witness to every single time that the Jewish people join my covenant, every time they bring their children into my bris." And by the way, you'll notice that throughout all the generations, no matter how secular and how far removed from religion the Jewish people were, there was always one mitzvah that they kept more than any other. Even more than the Pesach Seder, even more than fasting and Yom Kippur, is the bris of our sons. I think you would agree with me that in every country, in every period of our history, pretty much, there was always a bris that the Jewish people made for their sons. I mean, obviously there were some exceptions, but for the vast majority, I mean, even, assimilated American Jewry, the bris is a very, very sanctified ritual. And it's something which we always do, right? No matter where we lived in assimilation of Europe, in the Enlightenment movement of Europe, we've always done the bris. So the bris is where Elijah comes to testify, to bear witness how wrong he was for having spoken badly about the Jewish people in the story that I just mentioned. Ever since then, the prophet always spoke goodly about Israel. Even after he went up to heaven, the prophet Elijah never forgot the people of Israel, and he continues to worry about them and to redeem them. Until this very day, Elijah the prophet reveals himself in various forms to perfectly righteous people who are worthy of seeing him. Sometimes he appears in the form of a poor person begging at the door. Sometimes he appears as a horse rider riding upon a very strong horse, and sometimes he appears like an officer an officer of the king, of a non-Jewish king, and sometimes he arrives in the form of an Arab, right? With 4 flaps of his wings, Elijah, the angel, now travels from one end of the world to the other end. He doesn't get tired from doing goodness and kindness with humanity, who all are worthy of this. By the way, this is fascinating stuff, that we hear stories of another world, that Elijah literally comes back to this world to care for the people. He comes back here to care for us. And can you remember any of the stories where Elijah comes back in any of these forms? Do you remember a few days ago, as Tisha B'Av, I shared with you the story that there was a cow that lowed during the destruction of the temple, and an Arab merchant said to a Jew, this cow just lowed. It basically said that your temple was destroyed. And when it lowed a second time, the Arab merchant explained that the cow was saying that your Redeemer has now been born, your Moshiach has now been born. Have you heard of that story? I'm not sure if you have or not. Either way, that was the story. It's reported in the Talmud. Who do you think that Arab merchant was? You think he was an Arab who knew how to speak cow language? That was Elijah the prophet. What do you think, right? There's another story of, you remember the story of Nahum, Ish Gamzu, Nahum, the man of this also. Gamzu Latova. Remember that story, Gamzu Latova? He was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. Marty, I see you nodding your head. Right, that's good. Got some recollection there. That's great. Anybody else recollect? The story of Nahum Ish Gamzu. Andy's got it. Okay, good. Without reviewing the whole story, the crux
with the sand, right?
The sand, exactly. There you go, the sand. So the crux of the story was that Nahum is the leader of Israel at that time. He was representing the Jewish people before the Roman Caesar is bringing a delegation. He's bringing a special gift from the Jews to have him rescind the evil decree. And the jewels were changed by an unscrupulous innkeeper for sand. And before the incensed Caesar has the rabbi executed, the teacher of Rabbi Akiva, a minister of the king says, wait, your majesty, maybe this sand is special sand. Maybe the sand is the sand of their forefather Abraham, who threw the sand at his enemies, and the sand each grain of sand turned into spears and swords and weapons and vanquished their enemies. Caesar was intrigued. He held off the execution until they sent it to the front lines of a difficult battle. And true it was that the grains of sand all turned into spears and swords, and they were able to win the battle. Who do you think that minister of the king of Caesar was? Once again, it was our good old friend Elijah. Right, there he is. Now we understand why Elijah became the advocate of Israel for all time, because remember, we spoke about him in 2 weeks ago. We said that he was the one angel that agreed with God to create man. If you remember that story from 2 weeks ago. And God said, okay, I'm going to send you to the earth at the right time to defend the Jewish people. And because he broke one time in today's story, and he spoke badly about the Jewish people, therefore forevermore he becomes the advocate of Israel, right? Which is pretty good for us, And so every once in a while, by the way, I want to tell you, not every person that you meet is human. Sometimes you might bump into an angel. Sometimes you might bump into a person that looks like a person, but it could just be. That person might just be an angel that is saving you, from a difficult situation. I remember one time I was 20 2 years old or 21 years old. And I was the only driver in Leeds, England, in the yeshiva that we were in. And I remember that for whatever reason, I thought it was late at night, and the parking lot was always empty at that time of night. And I for some reason, it was very dark, and I pushed back. I reversed in the car without looking properly, and something got into me, and bam, I slammed on the brakes. I don't know why. I just slammed on the brakes. As I got out of the car, I missed the Rosh Hashiva's Mercedes-Benz by literally 2 inches. I literally stopped 2 inches before his Mercedes-Benz. It's interesting, and I felt to myself like, wow, it was almost like an angel made me stop on those brakes. I couldn't understand why I did. Thank God I did. There was no people there. Nobody was there. It was very, very late at night. There was no people there, but thank God I didn't hit his car. I think that there's angels around us, you know what I mean? And the stories of the prophets certainly corroborate that notion. Many times Elijah reveals himself to Torah scholars. He is the one who connects between the yeshiva on earth and the yeshiva up in heaven. And he is the one that reveals the secrets of Torah to the Torah scholars down here and to the righteous. Many miracles. There's such a thing, by the way, called a Ta'anit Chalom. Ta'anit Chalom means making a fast. No, sorry, a Shailas Chalom. I'm sorry, it's called an asking of a dream. If you're studying Torah and you reach a point that you don't know the answer to a particular conundrum in Torah, then what you can do is there's a whole procedure where you fast and you write the question beneath your pillow. And when you wake up, sometimes you get the answer. The answer is revealed to you from the yeshiva in heaven. It's happened many times. There's actually an entire response called Shailas Tshuvas Min HaShamayim, and questions and answers from heaven, which is, I'm actually going to be teaching, I think this Thursday night, I'm going to be teaching my Moshiach class. One of the sources that we're going to be learning is about the response from heaven. Was this great rabbi that his answers all came from inspiration that he had from heaven. So who is the one that inspires these rabbis with answers to their questions, logical answers to questions that they simply didn't know? Typically it would be Elijah. Many miracles happened through Elijah. Poor people and sick people were saved in his merit. People that were infertile were merited to have children after he promised them that they would have children. There's a story in the Medrash. I just read the story to my kids last night, actually. Just before bed, I read my kids a story last night from the Medrash about a couple in Baghdad. No, somewhere in Persia, that they were very hospitable, and they had a guest, and this guest basically told them that next year may you merit to have a messy house. And they couldn't understand what kind of blessing that was until they understood that then next year when the guy came back, the house was upside down. They had a baby boy, and he was pulling tablecloths and wine stains and crumbs everywhere. So that was the fulfillment of the blessing. So Elijah was the one that blessed them with a child. Sometimes when he's not able to save a Jew who is suffering, he will at least try to remove the anxiety from him, to encourage him, and to comfort him, to trust in God. Can
I ask you a question?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, Corey.
Elijah is supposed to come to our seders, right? We have his cup and all that. My question is, how is he, when he comes, how does he accomplish to come to every seder around the world? There's only one Elijah, right?
Well, if Elijah was a physical being, you'd have a very good question. But he's not a physical being. If Elijah is an angel, remember we learned this 2 weeks ago, that Elijah was an angel who was the only angel that agreed to God's proposal of creating man. And therefore God said, we'll send him to earth to be on earth for a period of time. I think he's primarily an angel more than a human being. I don't think he ever married and had kids, to answer Elaine's question that she wrote to me. What?
But what exactly is going to be accomplished when let's say he actually does show up. You know what I mean? I hope. Is it just to send the message of the redemption?
Well, hang on. That's my next piece. I'm going there right now in just a moment. I see that Alyssa joined us. Alyssa's with us. And who else can I see? That I'm going to get that in just a moment. Yeah, I see Alyssa's walking. That's great. Excellent. Fantastic. And on Facebook, I can't tell exactly who's there, but I'm going to keep on going. All right. So anyway,
hang on. A question. We seem to be using Elijah as a sort of a metaphor and I'm not sure if it's just intended to be a metaphor. As Corey mentioned, it's the Pesach thing, but then we also say that Teiku in terms of Gemara stuff, that any questions we don't understand, all dilemmas will be answered by Tishbe being Elijah. So is he really a real angel, or is he more of a metaphor?
I think a real angel is a contradiction in terms. What is a real angel? Like, do you mean like a physical angel? Is that what you mean?
Well, a real angel would be an apparition, a human apparition, right? A soul inside of a human apparition, or maybe some other physical apparition.
Look, he's not a tangible angel. I mean, he's an angel, right? So sometimes he becomes tangible when he comes down to this earth, right? Sometimes he defends us in heaven, as we spoke about last week. He's the guy that brings you out of Gehinnom, out of purgatory. He's the guy that tells you where to go when you get to heaven, right? He's got a lot of jobs, it looks like. I'm sorry, Andy, you muted yourself. I can't hear you. Andy, muted.
Yeah, I was just listening to you, so I get it.
So I think that we got to make peace with the fact that Elijah's an angel. That's the key here. Once you make peace with the fact that he's an angel, then you can understand that how he can be in 6 million homes at the same time, because he's an angel, right? So he doesn't have physical properties. He could be doing it like on Zoom. You know, he's like doing it on Zoom. He's doing every Jewish home from one place, no problem, no stress, right?
Well, no, not necessarily. Potentially, since a spirit can be divided up into lots of physical
exactly
bodies.
I'm only using Zoom as a metaphor. Where you know, theoretically, even our consciousness is able to be in many places at one time. You could be in Zoom in different places. So how much more so an entity which is fully spiritual, an angel, can be in different places at one time. It doesn't have physical properties and limitations. Sorry, Andy, you keep on getting muted. I can't hear you.
No, I muted myself on purpose. My Zoom practice is to always mute myself.
Oh, you know what? It could be that I'm seeing you with a delay. It could be that I'm looking at you on Zoom and I'm on Facebook and I'm seeing you with a delay. So I better go back to Zoom. Okay. So, anyways, that's the point over there. Okay.
Mickey approves. That's normal.
Okay.
That's normal Zoom practice.
Very good. So I got to get used to the two forums over here. But let me just wrap it up with what happens in the future, in the end of days. In the end of days, when Moshiach comes, Elijah will be the harbinger, the one to announce the redemption to the people of Israel, as it says in the prophet. Behold, I'm sending to you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great day, the great and awesome day. Before the coming of Moshiach, Elijah will come down to the people of Israel and he will return them into Teshuvah. He will inspire the people to Teshuvah. Everything difficult in the Torah of Hashem, he will explain, and he will reveal the secrets of the Torah until the Torah will be clear and understood for all the people of Israel, and everyone will be able to engage in the Torah joyously. Right? Everybody will be able to engage in the Torah joyously. There will be peace not only between Israel and the God in heaven, but through Elijah. But also, he will bring peace between man and woman, between husband and wife, between man and his fellow. And then, when all the people of Israel will be worthy to receive the Mashiach, Elijah will stand on the tops of the mountains and he'll call in a great voice. He'll say, "Mountains of land of Israel, until when will you stand silent? Know that the time of redemption has arrived and peace has come to the world." One day later, he will return and call out, "Goodness has come to the world." On the third day, he will call out in a great voice, "Redemption has come to the world." At that time, the angel Michael will blow a shofar, and the King Moshiach will be sent from heaven to gather together all of Israel from all the corners of the earth. After all of Israel will be gathered in the land of Israel, Mashiach will make miracles and wonders in front of everybody so that all will believe that the end of exile has come, the end of our troubles, the end of our exile. After that, Mashiach will command Elijah the prophet to blow a great shofar one time, and suddenly the light of Genesis The light of creation will return once again. Let me explain what this light is. This is the light that God hid from the time of creation until today. You may remember that when the story of creation happened, God created light on the very first day of creation. You remember that story, right? Light was created on the first day of creation. However, the sun was created on the fourth day of creation. So what was going on on day 1, 2, and 3? What kind of light was shining on day 1, 2, and 3 before the light of the sun? The only light that we know of today is the light of the sun. So what is this light that was shining before the light of the sun? That is the light of Genesis. It's a powerful light. I'm not sure exactly what kind of light it is. It's a light which is apparently only revealed to the perfectly righteous. And that will be revealed to all when Moshiach comes. The light of creation will be once again revealed after God hid it. It seems like God hid it after the sin of Adam and Eve. Remember, we light on a Matzi Shabbos, and during Havdalah we light fire. Remember? Why do we light fire? We know we do 3 things. We bless the wine and Havdalah because we mark the end of Shabbat, like we mark the beginning of Shabbat with Kiddush, with a special beverage. We smell the spices because spices go straight up to your soul. Smelling is the only sense that has no membrane. Goes straight to your soul. All the other senses have a membrane. The smell is the one that goes straight to your soul, which is the reason that when somebody faints, when they're unconscious, you give them strong smelling substances, and that tends to wake them up because it goes straight to the soul. But why do we have fire on a Saturday night? Why do we light the fire and we what are we doing? The reason is because Adam was created on Friday morning, and Adam sinned before Shabbos with the tree of knowledge. So that Saturday night, now that Shabbos, the light of Hashem was shining. But Saturday night, the light disappeared. The light that we were just talking about disappeared. And Saturday night, it was very dark. It was pitch black. And Adam was afraid. So at that moment, Hashem revealed to Adam how to make fire. Take 2 stones and clash them together. And fire sparks came out. And that's why we light fire on a Saturday night, to remind us of Adam and Eve, who created fire or discovered fire on a Saturday night. So obviously it was dark for them. Why was it dark for them, even though light was already created? Because the light that was created on the first day of creation was concealed around the time of the sin of the tree of knowledge. Okay, so hopefully that explains it. And that's what happens when Mashiach comes. When soon after the light will be revealed, we'll hear a second shofar blast of Elijah. And that's when all the dead will be resurrected all around the world, and they'll come back to the land of Israel. Now we know that only the dead in the land of Israel will come back to life. What about the people that are buried around the world? What about all the Jews that are buried in other places, not in the land of Israel? This is why there's a premium to be buried in Israel. It's a good thing to be buried in Israel. But if you're buried in the land of Israel, then you're going to have to schlep. You're not going to be able to rise up in the diaspora. You have to schlep. The Talmud says there'll be tunnels under the ground. Maybe that's what we need all these Hamas tunnels for, and these Mexican smugglers, where they're very good at tunnels. So maybe that's what, who knows? So there'll be tunnels that will take us all the way to the land of Israel. There's got to be something good about these guys. So there'll be tunnels with schlep. Look, they're pretty good tunnels. There was a nice tunnel they discovered in Mexico. It was air conditioned, and there was like railway tracks. Maybe, all these years we've been thinking that you're going to have to roll underground. Maybe they could put us in like a little train, and send us in an air conditioning tunnel all the way to the land of Israel. And then you rise up in the land of Israel. However, you'll notice that in our funerals here, what we do is we pour some soil from the land of Israel into the grave. Why do we do that? Why are we pouring some soil from the land of Israel into the grave? Because we want to make this site, this location, a piece of Israel. If we can't take the dead to Israel, we'll bring Israel to the dead. By pouring some sand from the land of Israel, this becomes holy. This becomes the land of Israel, with the hopes that the deceased will be able to rise right here, and they won't need to schlep, because we all know that Jews don't like to schlep. Right? So that's why we pour soil, Israeli soil, in the grave, in the graves of our loved ones. Right? Now, the third time that the shofar will blow will be revealed the glory of God before all of Israel, and everybody will be able to merit, to benefit from the radiance of the light of Hashem. The revelation of Hashem's light. This is the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy. The glory of God will be revealed, and all fleshly eye will see that God has spoken. We will literally see godliness all around us. I want you to think about this for a moment. Imagine we could, now we know that there's coronavirus everywhere. There's these little tiny germs flying around everywhere, right? So we're very careful of what we breathe in. Imagine you had a coronavirus glasses. Imagine you could see where there is coronavirus. That would be awesome, right? That would be so awesome. Wherever you go, you could see there'd be like a little red alert. You say, that corner over there, that room, that house has corona, don't go there, right? So imagine the flip side of that. You had glasses where you could see godliness. You could see the word of Hashem creating a tree, the word of Hashem creating a house, the word of Hashem creating your husband. It'd be amazing, right? You could just see the radiance like a beautiful light within each and every physical thing that exists in this world. That is the revelation of Hashem's glory, the way at least I understand it. What do I know? I mean, I'm not there yet, but this is my understanding of what the revelation of the light of Hashem would mean. Unless you understand it differently, we'd love to hear your thoughts. But that's what's going to happen at the third shofar blast, right? At the fourth shofar blast, the mountains and the valleys will break down. The mountains will become valleys, and the whole earth will be flat. Again, no more schlepping. The whole earth becomes flat, and the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, the holy temple, will be restored to its place with all of its glory. And then Elijah the prophet will sit to the right of Moshiach, the son of David, and he will be one of 8 princes who will sit in the front line before in the kingdom of Moshiach. Any questions so far? That was pretty intense, guys. Any questions, anybody?
I got a question.
Yes, Andy.
In the tefillah, when we say "Ba'orcha nireh or," is that what we're thinking about? The light of creation, that special light of creation, or is that unrelated?
I would think so. Ba'orcha nireh or, in your light, may we see light. Absolutely. What we think is light is really darkness. You know what I mean? Compared to the true light. In fact, if you look at the words of Isaiah elsewhere, it says they call light dark, and dark they call light, right? So Isaiah tells us very clearly that our priorities, our perceptions are upside down. What we think is light is dark. When we see light, that's really the absence of Hashem's light. It's dark. And what we think is dark, there might be the presence of Hashem's light, like we learned in Tanya chapter 26. We learned in Tanya there that when bad things happen to you, that's actually closeness to God. You may remember the metaphor of the lollipop versus the college scholarship fund, right? What we think is bad is really good, right? Sorry, Ann, did that answer your question?
I think so.
Fantastic. Any other questions or comments on this very intense summary on the end of days, which apparently is the story of Elijah, this guy who started from the very beginning of time, before man was created. This guy was an exemplary angel of God, and he lasts all the way to the end of time. What do you think about this? Any comments or questions? If there's no questions, I'm just going to do one more tiny piece as we move on from Elijah. We're going to go into his successor, the greatest prophet of God ever to exist after Moses. That's his successor. Just a little introduction to him. The greatest of the prophets of Israel was Elisha, the son of Shaphat. He was the student and the student and servant, the loyal servant of Elijah the prophet. After Elijah went up to heaven, Elisha became the leader of Israel, the Rebbe of Israel and its prophet. For 60 years, he ruled Israel. He guided them and he prophesied for them and he made them miracles and wonders. You may remember that Elisha asked Elijah before he died for one request. What was his request? We learned it last week. He says, I should be twice as great as you. Elijah said, that's a tall order. I'm not sure if I can do it, but the test of whether your request will be fulfilled or not is whether you will be worthy of observing the way I leave this world. And when Elisha was able to indeed see Elijah rise to heaven in the chariots of fire led by the horses of fire, that's when he knew that God had acquiesced to his pretty ambitious request. Elisha merited to the spirit of prophecy like no one else on earth except for Moses, the father of all the prophets. Only Moses was greater than he, since he left his house, his possessions, and he served loyally Elijah the prophet. Therefore Hashem gave him great reward. He gave him the spirit of prophecy, twice that of Elijah, before his master left this world. as mentioned, Elisha asked for double the greatness of Elijah, and he told him, if you see how I leave this world, your request has been accepted. And indeed, he saw him leave this world. His request was fulfilled. 8 miracles were done through Elijah the prophet, and 16 miracles were fulfilled through Elisha. And that's going to be the content of what we're going to be learning future forward. Now, Elijah is someone you might be much more familiar with, but Elisha probably far less familiar with. So it's going to be very interesting as we proceed and we learn more about Elisha in the coming weeks on Monday mornings. I want to just conclude by saying that unfortunately today we had no Torah sponsor, but still Torah study, the show must go on. If anybody would like to study to dedicate Torah study, you can do so online at jewishgardens.com/donate or by calling the office at 561-624-2223. That's jewishgardens.com/donate, 561-624-2223. Also, we will be adding a special addition to our daily Torah study by doing a Zoom davening, a Zoom to fill in Zoom davening at 7:45 in the morning at jewishgardens.com/Zoom. That's jewishgardens.com/Zoom. Tomorrow morning we'll continue with Tanya after our daily minyan at 7:45. Tanya will be at 8:30 as usual. Today at noon, Corey's giving a class on Tehillim and Hebrew reading at noon at Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom. Don't forget, we are starting a brand new course on Moshiach this Thursday night at 8 o'clock on Zoom and Facebook only. That's Zoom and Facebook. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday night, and we hope that you'll be there. So any questions or comments, please feel free to always email me to rabbi@jewishgardens.com. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com. I want to thank everybody for joining me this morning, and I'm going to wish you all a wonderful day. Be safe, and shalom.